The Art Beat, a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University. Hello and welcome to The Art Beat on KLZK FM 105.7. I'm your host, Peter Martins, coming to you from the Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University. And I'm thrilled to have as my guest today Lydia Wagner, who is Assistant Professor of Musical Theater in the School of Theater and Dance at TTU. So, hello, Lydia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, how are you doing today?
I'm good, yeah.
I'm surprised because you're directing a show, which usually translates into late nights and
it does.
A little sleep.
You know, it's funny. I was just saying, actually, I was like, I'm glad we're doing this interview this week, because if you had asked me for next week, I would have been a little bit more prickly about my acceptance. So we're right before things get really crazy.
Excellent. Okay, so since we're talking about the show already, the show is Lizzie, and it opens... When exactly?
It opens on October 9th, and it goes through the 19th.
Okay.
So.
All right. So the show was a name, Lizzie, and tell us who this Lizzie is.
Yeah. So some of us may be familiar with like a childhood nursery rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her father 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, gave her father 41, which it's a crazy nursery rhyme, but it's a real nursery rhyme based on a real person who is an alleged axe murderer of her father and stepmother back in 1892.
Both of them. Okay.
Both of them, yeah, in one go.
Wow. Okay.
Allegedly.
Lizzie Borden, right? Is that
Lizzie
the last
Borden,
name? Okay.
yeah.
Yes, I've heard of the character, but did not have my childhood brain filled with that particular nursery rhyme.
Well, okay. Come see the
sorry.
show and you'll hear it.
Yeah, good. Okay. So this has been turned into a musical in some fashion. Is this been around for a while? Is this a new musical?
Yeah. I believe it was written in 2016, so it's not too old. It never made it to Broadway. It's only had like an off-Broadway and regional kind of career of sorts.
Interesting. Okay.
But it's an exciting musical. It utilizes a really like punk riot girl influence for the music, despite it's being set in 1892. So it has like this kind of dichotomy and an internal angst of what are the emotions our characters are going through being expressed with a certain form of music.
And that was the original, that was the vibe with which the show was written, I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So what did you as the director have to do with that, or did you just have to, because as you say, there's not this kind of authoritative Broadway recording or something to respond to. Were you able to follow kind of more or less how the show was written, or did you feel more freedom in messing with it because people don't have preconceived notions about how the show's going to look or sound or feel?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think musically, we tried to really maintain what was written. So we are leaning into that influence heavily, I would say. But what is exciting is that you're right. There's not a lot of like production photos out there. There is no visual component that makes the show as well known as, say, like Hamilton or Wicked that have these big kind of pop culture influence on society. So I think for me, I was excited to explore this plot and these characters as a regular, real full show, and not just as like a rock concert, which is I think where this music gets done a lot, is they're like, oh, it's punk music. We'll put them in microphones and they'll stand and sing and it'll be great.
Okay.
And I wanted us to have the freedom to let these characters really like live and breathe under the circumstances that's placed upon them.
Okay, interesting. So it could lend itself to a concert musical sort of vibe if you went that direction. Okay. So the other thing that I think of when I think of musicals, and you mentioned a couple, is that there's some sort of heart-touching, maybe slightly melodramatic component to it, maybe a happy ending, or at least a hint at a happy ending. How does that work with this story?
That's a great question. It doesn't. Spoiler alert. It's really intense. I think that's part of why we were excited to work on it, especially with students. It's not often in music theater that you get to work with a show that doesn't try to wrap things up in a bow at all. Even shows like Next to Normal, which is dealing with really heavy topics, still sometimes are like, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And we'll sing a happy song.
We'll sing a happy song and it'll all be fine. And one of the things that we were committed to with this show was understanding that, and again, it's based off a real person, right? So when your parents are murdered that brutally and you go to trial for it, even if you're not convicted, is there a happy ending there?
Right.
What does happen next? Because I don't think that it's just that you get to go on with your life as before.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So and with the writing of the musical, the creators of the musical, did they add to, augment, extrapolate from what we do know about the story as far as creating a show arc of some kind?
Yeah, definitely. It is a dramatization of events, right? So there are lots of things that are a part of the staged play that weren't necessarily facts we can confirm nor deny about her story in real life. And that was a huge thing that the cast and I talk about kind of on a daily basis, actually, is, the cast was tasked with doing a lot of research about these real people that this show is about. And we spend time every day discussing, okay, what are elements from the real story that we think we should keep here? And what are elements that, we do need to let go of their reality and embrace kind of the fantasy that the playwrights have offered for us?
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That probably is true in almost any musical, but really in your face.
Yes.
This sort of thing. Wow. Fascinating. So now, as director, and you've directed shows in past seasons.
Yes.
Right. So that this isn't your first go at it at Texas
yeah, it's my
Tech or
second.
Anywhere. Okay. All right.
Well, my second here.
Seasoned veteran. Right.
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
So one thing, I'll ask this on behalf of our audience, even though it's really asking for myself. So the role of producer and director, right? Now, most people in our audience, I think, have heard of the musical The Producers, right? And they seem to be fairly involved in the staging of that particular show and that fictitious story, right?
Yeah.
Could you just maybe explain in the abstract the difference in those roles in a stage production like this?
Absolutely. So a director, in layman's term, a director is all ideas all the time, right? It's very much like, what's the creative vision? What are we gonna do that's exciting? And they help articulate that vision to all of our designers. So the folks that design the lights and the set. They make sure that there's a cohesive idea that every element of a production is contributing to make this story come to life. And then a producer is in charge of making sure that it happens. Okay. Right? So they are in charge of a lot of the communication elements interdepartmentally. They're in charge of the money, all of this stuff that is more, for me, in director mode right now. I'm like, it's the boring stuff. But it's the stuff that requires a lot of logistical thinking.
Sure. Yeah. The administrative head of a production rather than the creative or artistic head of a production.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. And obviously in some cases, smaller films or whatever, you see the same person as producer and director, which I'm sure causes its own challenges.
Couldn't be for me, but I'm stoked for those people. More power to them.
If they can do it. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So I guess in this case, the producer is really the School of Theater and Dance at this.
Mm-hmm. We do have a productions manager here, Joshua Witt, who's a staff member here, and they're fantastic at what they do, especially given that so many of our designers and our crew members are students here. So it kind of works twofold, right? Where Josh is balancing the educational component of working on a show as a student, as well as with professionals in their field.
Right. And thank you for bringing that up, that you're, as you as director have to cast this vision and get all of your performing forces on board, you're also teaching them how this works for their own futures. How do you balance those two things? I
think in so many different ways. I feel as though I really benefit from the fact that I see most of the musical theater students here regularly. So it is easy for me to integrate what we're doing in our classwork with what is happening in our show and vice versa.
Nice.
But I think the biggest thing for me is just kind of implementing a lot of kindness and clear instruction, right? I think it can
Those are
be
underrated
really,
often, aren't they?
Well,
yes.
I think it can be really easy, especially for someone like myself who just came from the professional field and is jumping back into academia in this sense. It can be really easy to expect from students the same output and number of hours that a professional actor you're paying, weekly would be able to put into a show. And so the biggest thing that I try and do is make sure that I'm clear on expectations and ensuring that this is an agreement that I'm never trying to ask more than they can actually feasibly put out as students.
Well, that sounds very nice of you.
It's just something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in any school situation, being aware of all the other pressures and ways that students are pulled in different directions is very helpful. So in this case now, since there's such a musical component, this rock music component, how are you bringing that to life in terms of the production? Do you have a band? Is it some tracks? Is it a combination?
We're using a live band for this one.
Okay.
And they exist really with us in the space. They're going to be a huge kind of visual and felt component of the show. The show's done in the Black Box this year, which is a smaller, more intimate venue. And we haven't put a musical in the Black Box in a couple years, maybe 4.
Right.
So it's really exciting for us to get back into this space because it allows both audience and cast to get that visceral kind of like bass thumping component of being with a band that you don't always get when you're in the Magen stage with it. Just with its size alone.
Sure. No hiding in the pit for the musicians in this case.
No, they're right there.
So yeah, as a musician, how do you coach a musician to act at least decently on stage?
Yeah, I am leaving that. I mean, we have a music director who's going to help them, but in many ways, the quote acting component from the musicians really actually should stem from the cast. So the cast will have moments in which they are invited to interact with the band, and it's their initiative that I hope will help the band feel. And again, I think part of it too is just with it being based on like contemporary styles of music, we don't have to deal with the same structure as like concert dress performance, right?
Okay.
It really, it should just feel like we're at a house party.
Gotcha. Oh, that sounds fun. Maybe more improvisational contact and interaction on stage. I look forward to that. Well, I don't want to get through all of our time here before asking you about before your time at Tech. So you've been here for now 3 years. I believe this is your 3rd year, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, you mentioned a little bit ago of coming from the performing field. So what were you doing before you landed yourself in Lubbock, Texas?
Yeah, I worked for many years as a professional actor, stage manager, and producer of new musicals in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So yeah, I worked for a production team called Forge Productions, in which we helped workshop, 6 or 7 new musicals, some of which have continued to have a full life in New York City and DC, which is really exciting work that I'm so passionate about. And, you know, I think once a high school theater kid, always a high school theater kid, right? Like that performing element is never, I don't think for me it will ever truly go away.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you keep coming to work every day,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. And that's interesting, the view of the crucible where big shows come from, right? I mean, we kind of know about them as a culture in general when they get to Broadway and have an extended run or whatever, but there's a lot more going on of these sorts of shows, like you said, regionally and locally. And is the aspiration of people who put these on always to like the goal is to make it big on the big stages of the East Coast?
Not necessarily. I think there's 2 types of success in the theater, right? There's like commercial success, which usually does involve Broadway and involves some kind of like monetary reward. But I also think there's shows that just value artistic success, right? Where the goal is really, can we make something that's artistically fulfilling, that breaks some kind of mold, and can we make it regardless of if it has a life on Broadway or not? And sometimes shows get to do both, right?
Ideally, I suppose.
That's always the dream, of course. But yeah, I would say a lot of shows these days really do love an out-of-town workshop process. So they try things in smaller cities where they're more likely to get stage space at an affordable rate and really take time with young and hungry artists. That's who we usually hire to do our new readings is
how do you test for
graduates.
hungry? That's my question. No, just kidding.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, we line them up. But yeah, it's always thrilling to start new work on young professionals in the field because they are so ready and willing to go the extra mile and to dig really deep, and they're not as afraid of like embarrassing themselves, I guess. Like, how will this affect my career?
Sure.
So yeah, we've had quite a few musicals that are really thrilling and bouncing off some fantastic ideas. I wish I could tell you more about them, but they're in processes that I can't talk about.
Okay. Oh,
but they're really
cloak
exciting.
Of secrecy. I like that. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to having them more, maybe come to town in some fashion and hit our stages here. So, well, thank you. With that, let's say thank you to Lydia Wagner, and so happy to meet you, talk with you about the upcoming production of Lizzie, and hope to see you in the Black Box Theater, right, in the Majan Theater building on the campus of Texas Tech starting October 9th. Excellent for Lizzie. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. The Art Beat, a weekly program putting you in touch with artists and arts events from the J.T. and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts at Texas Tech University.